Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, and I hope you guys have all had great conversations now in the break. I'll invite you to take your seats because we're going to have a final session now where we sum up a little bit about what we've heard about today, also the thoughts that we're going to take with us going forward, and hear a little bit from our experts about how we can take what we've heard today, the discussions and the debates, and really kind of boil it down into an understanding of what's actually actionable and how those actionable steps can actually take place. So we talked about social impact, we talked about community building, we talked about student mobility in general, we talked about policy reform, and of course also market strategies. How do you speak to the customer? How does that customer's needs changing, and all of these kind of things. So before we get into the future and how we're going, we're just going to look at what we heard about today. So we heard something in the session before last, something that's really stuck in my mind, which was about the idea of social impact and social value. And social value, we heard, was the software where brick and mortar is the hardware. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask Pete, as somebody who's talking about internationalization, international education, do you agree with that sentiment, that metaphor? And how would you see that happening in real life?
Well, it's a good metaphor, I think. It works. The truth is, yes, software, in a way, most of us can't really see it, don't have a way of really observing it. So in that sense, I think it's an apt comparison. Because, of course, social value is, in the end, the crucial thing that not only our students, but that our community needs. It goes both directions. The student community should benefit the wider community, and the students should also benefit from the wider community in building their self and their competences. So it's hard to observe or measure, but it's definitely the crucial thing. So in that sense, yeah, the software is the same way. But I do see a problem with that. Of course, the question is, will all students be able to benefit from that and to engage with that in the same way? It could create a new type of inequity if we don't pay attention to it, because it's true that it gives it's a way for students to express themselves, to engage with the community, to develop their own identity, their strengths, and so on. But not every student has the basis for that. So we need to be mindful of that and build something around the students that will make them be able to engage on equal footing.
This inequity question is, of course, something that is part of education and the education system inherently,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Frank, looking at the entirety of the discussion today, and also the inequity issue that we just heard about, going forward, what should be adopted into the agenda? What can we all do collectively moving forward to make it a better kind of marriage of the hardware and software?
Sure.
Better glue, so to say, for these communities.
Well, I don't know about you, but I have so many notes and so many actionable points that I was just trying to think of, like, how do we connect the dots, and how do we allow us also to have a few objectives? But one of the things that related to social value, I think, was that in the last panel as well, it was defined at different levels. Like, everybody can contribute at their own level. Sometimes it's more as a city hosting people around the conversation. How do we create affordability now? Not just like one partner has to be the solution for that. More at the university education part, and making sure that people have access to education, I thought it was very interesting what Samsam also said about don't talk about us, don't consult us, but really, really create solutions with us, regardless of the subject. So that was one of the things that I thought it was really, it's important to listen, but it's maybe even more important to co-create with the people that we are trying to help and create social value. So that was sort of the scale of where, for me, social value we can talk about in the next year.
Sometimes I feel like we have to remind ourselves what the definition of these words actually is. Social. It means that we're doing this together. That's what it is.
Well, but Jo Winchester made a good point earlier, and she said, like, from a valuation point in real estate, we used to see real estate only as an economic asset. And that definition has with the ESG movement basically really reshaping valuation practices. And it was nice that everybody at that panel concluded we're in the early phase and we're still trying to invent the wheel, or we haven't invented it yet. So coming from a humble position and developing these practices together, great starting point.
I'm going to actually take that right to Jordi, actually, because I think that feeds into a lot of what you can speak to from the real estate side of it. You guys don't own the real estate at Housing Anywhere, so what does this concept mean, that real estate is more than just the valuation of the property itself? What does it mean for the community it's in, and what does it mean for the generation that we're speaking about today?
Well, how we look at it, or how I look at it mostly these days, is that this value, this social value that we look at, are the promises of what these cities are going to be in the next 10 years. And this is a discussion that you need to have as a social community together. What we see these days is that it's very challenging to get all these stakeholders on the same at the same table and really have a platform or a framework that we can utilize time and time again when we want to have these conversations, when we want to co-create, when we want to shape what our cities are looking like in these 10 years. And what Sam was saying there, co-creation is, well, perhaps something the Gen Z wants to do. It's something that we need to do here. We cannot only look at one stakeholder and say, you take the lead. Universities, you take the lead. The industry, you take the lead. Technology platforms, you take the lead. No, we have to do it together. And I think that the dissonance right now that is more or less there is that there's a few of these stakeholders that are crucial to have at the table, and they're not at the table. So I think in that vision that we have to create, we really need to find ways how to incentivize them to be there and show and tell and show
carrots over sticks, so to say.
Yeah, definitely. These cities, I think the best carrot is still cities compete for talent, and talent competes for space these days, and it makes sense then for cities to talk to that talent and to talk to them. How can we get you into our city to actually be part of that social community?
That's actually a great transformation to you, Bill. So we talked before. I love, and Frank, I want to hear about the future in a second. But I love the whole concept of smart cities. I'm a little bit of a nerd for it, a little bit of a geek for it. We talked earlier, and you said you hate the term smart cities. I want to know why.
Well, I hate the way it's been usurped by the technology world, and I'm an inner geek, starting my life at IBM, so I have all due respect for technology. But smart cities, if you've been to any of the major industry conferences, it's all about measuring traffic lights and sewage and other things. Efficiency, it's not about this. And the smart begins with universities. It begins with cities that understand that that's their greatest asset, that cultivating, nurturing, attracting the talent, and then most importantly, understanding that the quality of life they create, which isn't about the stoplights and the sewage, it's about the environment, will help retain that talent that's coming from all over the world. So we have gotten distracted by people who have something to sell to cities, lots and lots of technology, and not invested in the public realm, the character, the quality of life that's going to attract talent in the first place and keep that talent once they've graduated from university.
I feel like there's an echo between you and Jordi. I don't know. There's definitely something there. Frank, going forward, if we're looking at this partnership is maybe even too lightweight a term, this co-creation that needs to take place going forward with policymakers, with the real estate sector, and with the municipalities that these things are housed in, and the universities, of course, as well, in those communities. What can this kind of co-creation, how can this be initiated, and what can we do as organizations and as individuals to bring that forward?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that happened on this stage was informing others what we have seen or what inspired us. And I think all of us are part of platforms that are working on parts of the solution. And that goes from the internationalization agents in the universities that deal with it on a day-to-day basis, to the urban development community that is trying to understand how you can create districts when there's not that much public funding maybe available anymore, to technology and enablers for students and housing providers to connect with each other. And I think for me, one of the beautiful things of today is that we can actually learn very quickly by being basically the platform where we can come together. I heard something about like Hamburg, like this, they had a great, basically city took an initiative to bring people together. It could be from the AIA that we say, okay, let's bring the housing component into our conversation. So I think that's where the class can really help, inspire people, but also really connect people. And we've already received lots of invitations also to be part of conversations. So I think that's one of the things that we can really do. Yeah.
I wish
in Europe and outside.
Absolutely, yes. We're going to be well travelled after this conference.
Frequent flyers everywhere.
But on the, I think one of the things that we can also be conscious of is where language has shifted and where paradigms have shifted. And I think, when you talk about ESG, what was happening already in student accommodation from the beginning was understanding that we were dealing with people that in many cases are vulnerable in the moment of their lives, and we're taking care of people. And I think also for you, for example, when you started taking care of exchange students going to a city where they just needed housing for a few months, that was not a year contract that we're looking for. There was no one that provided that. So you find small things. But that paradigm shift, that has really happened. And that's why we're talking as real estate people now about community building and taking care and student well-being. I mean, it has become natural to us.
And we use the word well-being in a non-ironic way, which I think is fantastic. And I think in the 2000s, we would not have had this same, how should I say, decorum, talking about well-being and mental health and things like that. It would have probably been poo-pooed and kind of pushed off to the side. So we have definitely evolved in the conversation, but as you said, there's a lot to be done. Looking into these kind of finding niches that have not been filled, we have also the question of internationalization and global mobility in the education sector. And going forward in that realm, Pete, if you had one wish from the conversations had today, exactly, a kind of a beacon, a shining star, what do you call it, a shooting star that you could make a wish on, what would it be?
Well, that our students who are interested and motivated to expand their horizons could find the way to do that. And I think all the conversations of today do bring elements in that direction. And I think that's really what, there's also, of course, when we talk about mobility and internationalization, there's also climate concerns. We don't want to
It's because I said flights before. I know. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have
so
said that.
we're thinking about how to bring this international exposure to all of our students, and a lot of it will be online, but still physical travel to different locations is an irreplaceable thing for young people to experience. So to remove obstacles, frictions that can keep the motivated students from doing that is removing those obstacles is absolutely crucial, and to offer that opportunity. So that's really what I took from today is, housing and finding a good place to live is actually the main obstacle, probably linked to the financial side of it, of course. But so if we can make progress in that and bring that narrative into our universities to really, and also have the conversation of bringing the knowledge within the university to the wider community and to this community, that would be hugely beneficial for all, I think. That's what I took from today.
Everyone at this panel and everyone in this audience is touching minds and touching hearts at a very pivotal point in people's lives. And I think that that's what we have to keep reminding ourselves and remembering. Also, when facilitating these kind of changes or these kind of improvements in our sectors, really understanding, as you said, that travel is irreplaceable, or meeting people in person is irreplaceable for the learning and the education that happens in these kind of face-to-face interactions and these kind of things. Frank, Kellyanne, what does this mean for the class conference? What does this mean for the class in general? What's happening next?
So you want my full pitch now?
Oh, bring it, Kellyanne, bring it.
Okay, guys, I actually do invite you as citizens of our community to join us next year in shaping these ideas and visions going forward amongst our cities and across the whole of the continent, and maybe even wider by the sounds of it. I think it's super important that we are not only present around the table, but we're also held accountable and responsible for what we're doing on the ground. So if you have a vision to co-create something that is absolutely amazing for our future generations and to help them flourish, then I invite you to step forward on our panels, during moderation, in the audience. Next year, it's about going bigger and better. It's about being present in the cities that we are meant to be in and where the universities are present as well. I am so excited that we can start having in-person, because although everyone keeps telling me I'm very tall, at seeing me in person, having those in-person intimate conversations, whether that's through networking, through these amazing conversations that we're having today, we want to touch and highlight on the main 4 or 5 core themes, which is social impacts, which we've kind of gone over time and time again, but also how we can accelerate and measure that. The kind of community building and well-being, what does it actually really mean? Not just putting a label on it and a sticker on it. How do we measure it? How do we actually create happiness amongst our communities and societies? Looking at student mobility and that key word, that internationalization. I really loved before when, hi, Charlie, by the way, when Charlie pinpointed that he has children and that he doesn't care if his children go into higher education around the corner in a different city. They don't see themselves as just maybe Dutch citizens, but as people that want to go out and study, and they have not a national card, but a global citizen card. And I love that. And touching on how we make those changes on the ground. So looking at policy reform and making sure that we really grasp how we can kind of shape and influence that, especially amongst the municipalities. I really do invite you, if you have anybody within your cities that are changing voices amongst city leaders, to bring them forward and invite them to our discussions, because I think that's really, really important. And finally, looking at market strategies across the rest of Europe, and again, wider, looking at investment opportunities, but also growth opportunities as well.
I think this is a great kind of kick off into that last subject. Market strategies is its own beast, of course, understanding the generation, but also the market on the other side, of course, is the service providers, the housing providers, all of these things. There's no end to the opportunities, the potential opportunities, but it is, people's attention spans are finite, people's understanding of the problems are finite, probably at least, but they can be changed. And I think, Jordi, you've experienced that in your sector many times, that a no doesn't actually mean a no if you go at it again in a different way, perhaps, or explain to something in a different way.
Well, it's what we have to do, especially when it comes to shaping this vision and making it a reality. And we talk a lot about, I think about the tenants and the well-being and et cetera, but what we see, with all the data that we have and all those markets in which we're active, is that there's a lot of the people that are not being served. It's almost like we could change your name from Housing Anywhere to lack of housing anywhere, because that's really the situation. And when we talk about making sure everybody gets this safe landing spot when they start their academic careers as an undergraduate or as a master's student, we really see that actually finding housing is one of the biggest stress factors at the start, and it's sometimes even postponing or even completely canceling the study of the opportunities that people have ahead of them. So I'm very eager to see how we can expose that data more, and then we don't have all the data, so we need everybody to kind of pitch in and bring their views to solve for that problem, and actually give everybody who wants to have that opportunity to in the end drive social impact to also participate.
It's not simple. There are definitely...
It's not simple. No. And we've tried many times, and I think we'll keep on trying.
But that's a very positive note to talk about with policymakers. Of course, it can be frustrating. Things can every municipality is different. Every country is different. But we do have new kind of overarching structures. The EU being one of them, but also intermarket organizations, bilateral agreements between countries that can also facilitate that.
Absolutely.
So don't give up, everyone. When something seems like it's insurmountable, there may be another way, by bringing in another cohort, by bringing another way. Sorry.
Well, what I'd like to add to that is that, and Frank briefly touched on it, is that it's really, we need to be accessible ourselves as well. Whether it comes to the information that we have, the connections that we have, it's very important that we can solve this accessibility problem to accommodation in the end, to cities, to opportunities, by being accessible ourselves. That's where it has to start, I think. And
I think Christine mentioned that as from competition to collaboration, really having a different approach. And that also,
So we're not competitors. We're one industry that has to work together to solve for the city's needs.
Yeah.
When it comes to markets, of course, the universities have different incentives. Some universities are private universities, some are funded by the students themselves, some are funded by governments, and of course, therefore, the incentives are different. Frank, going forward, as a community, as an education community, but as a generation-driven community, how can that kind of market understanding be propagated? How can we open up older institutions' minds, so to say, to the needs of the market, both on the B2C side with the students and the kids to be educated, so to say, and on the educator side and the B2B side?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously the answer is like come to these conferences where you will meet other
back
people
next
that
year.
are sharing. But jokes aside, I mean, it is actually an interesting. I think Bill, you also have mentioned it often in our conversations. Like people sometimes didn't even understand how much wealth was created around universities, how important these universities were in cities. I was born in Rotterdam, where basically industrial decline caused huge amount of unemployment. The university was the one that drove the employment growth again. So we know it intuitively, but we don't yet create the true value that is there. And I think it was mentioned in the early panel as well, when we talk about universities and cities of tomorrow. That's a big ticket that cities have that they can work with. And I mean, Bill, maybe you can elaborate from the real estate industry. This is an interesting conversation to have. How can we create districts around this?
I was just going to say, from a real estate perspective, they spend a lot of time focusing on educating the municipalities, but it's also educating the community as well about why it's important to have a university to help the community thrive.
It's not just chaotic bachelor students. Absolutely.
Exactly.
What, Bill, sorry.
Well, no, listen, I couldn't agree more, and I think it comes back to something you said earlier, Frank. It's about collaboration. And what I've seen, although I sound like this, I've been in Europe for going on 30 years, and there is a big difference between the relationship universities have with their city. And by city, I mean both community. Adam mentioned town and gown. Where are you, Adam? Town and gown earlier, the friction in the U.S. Here, I see the universities as being even more siloed, more isolated from the cities, and I've seen it in cities from Birmingham to Glasgow to even this city, where they don't understand the value created, the value in the talent, the value in the innovation. And if you look, again, at U.S. examples, there's the Rotterdam version of the U.S. is your neighbor, Adam, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was a steel town, an industrial city, and it has completely transformed in the last 30 years thanks to the contributions of its universities. And that's because of a collaboration between the city leadership, the university leadership, and the business community. So the word collaboration is, I think, the essence of getting to the bottom of this. And right now, in most cities, they don't understand each other. They don't talk to each other. How many people are here from city leadership, government?
Exactly.
None. How many?
They're on the camera.
Yeah.
All saying.
Hi, guys.
I'm seriously.
No, but most city governments I've dealt with don't fully appreciate the value of the. In fact, they too have often an adversarial relationship with their university community. So until you get to the bottom of that, and they appreciate, they need to do everything they can to make that university successful. And part of that is providing adequate housing for the students that are coming from all over the world, that they then want to stay in that city.
I like this staying in the city is just something you don't want to also silo that time period in these people's lives. They are still people. They are not just students. We heard that before as well in the discussion. We don't want to other an entire generation just because they currently are at university.
A great example of that, by the way, everybody looks at Silicon Valley. A couple guys named Hewlett and Packard created and then ultimately what is it, Adam? The Stanford Research Park right next to Stanford. So they could poach the talent, the professors and others to incubate companies. And that is the birth of Silicon Valley, was the relationship between Stanford and the surrounding community. And it was a real estate play. A lot of people made a lot of money on the real estate. It also benefited the governments, the communities, and the university by helping to incubate that talent.
So incentivization, not just on the part of the organizations talking to the municipalities saying it's good to have these people here, but also incentivization on an economic front, simply saying it makes sense to have spin-offs. We should incubate these ideas here and keep the patents in our country and not let them all go off to places that are better at doing spin-offs. So this is definitely a FOMO aspect that can be brought into the argumentation that will bring people's minds perhaps exactly when it's about the moneros, it's different.
and talent and businesses choose. If as a city you're not, acting on that cue, they will go elsewhere. They will go elsewhere, and then in the end your city declines. So I think if you are a city leader, it's in your best interest to start a conversation. And if you are an early mover, or if you are moving on this already, you're already ahead of the pack. So just say go and keep going. you will be, in the end, in a position where you will be attracting the business and the talent that will make your communities thrive.
But I do wonder whether businesses could have a voice in this as well. So I know that there's lots of businesses, maybe not particularly in our industry, but across other industries as well, that are struggling to hire talent within their cities. Yeah. So there's also an incentive there for businesses to kind of at least hire their voices and say that this is important, that cities and universities talk to each other for that reason.
Well, when I was at IBM, if you look at where IBM research centers are and where the highest priced and most talented IBM employees are, they're all university cities. And they're not necessarily the Palo Altos, which, by the way, there is, but it's Research Triangle Park, it's Grenoble, it's Bordeaux, it's cities that have a talent pool, that have and a quality of life. Yeah. And that the talent wants to stay once they've graduated from that university. And IBM's not alone in that. They select not just for the cost of housing, but they select for the quality of the talent.
Bill, that's a really good point, because I think I'm also, where I come from, we're talking about the States. That's not good. Yeah. But the biotech became a huge thing in New York State, for instance. Who knew, right? And all of a sudden, a few companies decide to put incubators there and have a few spin-off companies.
A little help from Mayor Bloomberg, by the way, who put a lot of money in.
Let's not talk about the U.S. But no, Frank.
But it's collaboration.
Yeah. Yes, but Frank, what can we do on a European level when it comes to these kind of incentivizations? We as a cohort of the education industry and also this kind of temporary housing, these kind of things, what can we do to bring businesses into the fray to incentivize that kind of an understanding of the benefits of a university for not only a municipality but for the economy?
Well, I think the knowledge about that is growing. I mean, there's more research being done that people understand that we're talking about an ecosystem, and that word was mentioned a lot too. And I think universities will also gain their voice in this conversation when they know their impact and they understand how integrated they are as into this ecosystem and how many people depend on that. So I think that's one part. Also, what you started this morning saying, also the idea of learning is changing as well, and that was mentioned in a couple of panels. That means that also learning should be, when we think of it as lifelong, is that it's something that can be recurring. So we can also rethink that part. And it includes even things like, how do you solve the affordability part? Adina from Greystar was mentioning, if you have skill in projects, you can actually do cross-subsidization and other things that otherwise you're not able to do. So I think one of the images that I remember from Christine Boland when she showed this new, in Vienna, by the way, this new IKEA is like, we have a preconceived notion now of IKEA that is a blue box with these yellow letters. Yeah. And they just flipped that whole model and basically are building now in Vienna, of course.
It's like 200 meters from my apartment.
an IKEA city, in a way, without that brand. So I like the idea that we start to, with all the resource that we have available, because also this industry has more money behind it than ever before. It has institutionalized, the yields have been compressed, it's becoming more it's not easy to build, but never before we had so many resources to build on campuses, to revitalize districts with projects and of scale, and then be able to create those ecosystems with the stakeholders. So.
But sorry to jump in, but if you think about what are the reasons why these innovations are not always happening, even though you may have all the objective facts and projections and everything, it still boils down to trust between decision makers in a certain point of time. And that's what Charlie mentioned it also. Investing trust is one of the most productive things you can do, actually, and jump in and just have faith and attach your faith to your fellow stakeholders and jump in together and really be invested. And that's often a matter of this trust. It's hard to have institutional trust, but it's often trust between people, decision makers, at the right time. And that's why you need to bring these people into a face-to-face conversation.
Pete, I think that's a really, really great thought to end us on, because first of all, we're all here. We can build trust between each other, bilateral trust, so to say, on a personal level, but also between our organizations, that we can incentivize for things together. Actually, it's of course together you have a stronger voice, a louder voice. So Frank, Kellyanne, what are the final thoughts you want to leave us with today?
I said quite a lot.
No pressure.
I guess the final thoughts are, it's you guys that are sat in the room that are going to be able to make the change happen. And you guys are doing amazing things already. But I think the things that we've really thought and spoken about today can definitely be leveled and scaled up. So not only not only think about your investments, but think about the longevity that it's going to impact on your cities. And I think that's a really nice piece to just take away on.
Yeah. And I think we can promise that we will enable these kinds of interactions and these face-to-face contacts in the next year as well, in the places that you find inspirational. I think a lot of people gave back that this year, when we did the site visits again, it's so fantastic that community members open the doors to the project, show what they have learned, share what they've learned, and that's where that trust element starts. And I think that's what we can contribute.
On that note, I know you guys are all holding glasses or beers or things. I would like y'all to raise a glass to Frank and Kellyanne for organizing this fantastic...
And Omar and Oscar and many other people that are here.
And all the other
class.
team members,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
You've been a great audience. This has been the class conference. Thank you very much. Cheers.
To the water.
Cheers.